Great. Okay, well, good afternoon and thanks for joining us. I'm Becky. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of the English Association, and it's just a real pleasure to be here with you this afternoon. A quick word about the English Association. We are a learned society and subject association which was founded in 1906 to promote, support, and celebrate the discipline of English studies. We cover all stages of education from primary and early years through to secondary and further and higher education and beyond, and we cover all parts of the discipline across language, linguistics, literature, and creative writing. Events like this one are made possible by the fantastic contribution of our volunteer speakers. So thank you so much to Bob, Leah, and Jennifer for giving us your time so generously this afternoon. Our members also make it possible to keep these events free and open to all by paying their membership fees. So if you would like to contribute to the national conversation about English and help support our discipline, please do consider joining us. It costs just £55 to support our events and campaigning work for a whole year, and you get access to a range of member benefits, including online access to all our journals. Okay, now it is my genuine pleasure to hand over to tonight's speakers. So over to you, Bob. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Becky. And I'm Bob Cox. I'm the author of the Opening Doors series of books, long-term educator, passionate for excellence for all. And we wanted to bring you a session where we could respond a little bit to what the National Literacy Trust report said about the decline in reading for pleasure by actually passing on some ideas from our network of schools. Because we've built over the last decade, and it does take time, a terrific network of schools, all of whom have got equity and excellence at their heart, but not just talking about it, but doing the walking too, and actually building an excellence for all English curriculum. And of course, the independent reading aspect of it is very important indeed. So we hope to bring you just some new perspectives. I'll speak for about 15 minutes. I'll then hand over to Leah, and I would like to thank Jennifer Webb very much for joining us to finish the session. And Jennifer's director of the Carlton Academy Trust, and it's a real privilege, Jenny, to have you with us to complement two members of the Opening Doors team. So thanks very much. I will just have a few slides to back up what I'm talking about. So let's see if we can get all this going in the normal way. And there we go. Okay, so those are my details, and please do follow me. I'm on Blue Sky now at Opening Doors B Sky Social, and we've called it Reading for Pleasure and Growth, and that's really important because in the examples that I'm going to give and continued by Leah in a little bit more detail, we want to try and show how building skills, building that joy of challenge and ambition in reading, which goes on in the classroom, in the actual English lessons, has sometimes been put into a separate box. And from what our schools say, from what we see, from the long careers we've had, we think we can see in front of our eyes that there's more of a link between what you do as a teacher in your actual lessons and the effectiveness of the facilitation of the independence and choice when the children come to actually think about their own reading. So we'll try to gradually get that across. In a way, myself and Leah, we're speaking for a UK network of many, many, many schools. And actually, there are sort of sub-members as well who join us occasionally, and it just goes into thousands, where they have actually developed their mindset and their thinking so that pitching high and including every child becomes the way in which they work. And if you like, the data, the ideas, the frameworks, the units are backed up by the Opening Doors series of books, with the blue book, Opening Doors to Ambitious Primary English, being the theory and evidence book, the lead book, which actually takes ideas from what's been going on around the UK and puts them into a 13-chapter theory form. I must give, as I think everyone should, due respect and thanks and admiration to the Open University and UKLA long-term Reading for Pleasure project. I've put some links there for you. Of course, almost everyone, particularly in primary, who talks about reading for pleasure owes some kind of debt to Professor Teresa Kremin and her teams over the years, who've built the research base and done so much sterling work. So they've obviously influenced us. And what we're going to say is really just some new perspectives that we hope will help, but absolutely due respect. And due respect to the National Literacy Trust, because their research has really got us thinking about how you improve reading for pleasure. And our Reading for Pleasure and Growth title partly came from reading this in a very short session. I've just picked out one or two statistics. 1 in 3 8 to 18-year-olds told us in early 2024 that they enjoyed reading in their free time, the lowest level of reading enjoyment since 2005. Looking there at the at what I've put in red, and remember, all I've been able to do is pick out one or two key points. The drop in reading enjoyment was more pronounced for those aged 11 to 14 and 14 to 16 than it was 8 to 11, but there's still a drop. And it interested me that the drop in reading enjoyment was more pronounced for those who didn't receive free school meals than for those who received free school meals, resulting in near identical reading enjoyment levels for both in 2024. And contrary to what we saw for reading enjoyment in free time, an almost similar percentage of boys and girls said that they enjoyed reading at school. Well, I've included those because this session is about food for thought. And so it's something for you to take away that may or may not surprise. There is so much to say about the really worrying and disturbing drop in enjoyment that is to do with society and is to do with very big issues that would take us way beyond the brief of this 1 hour. So we are very much concentrating on ideas for the classroom and really moving on from what it said about a level of enjoyment actually at school. We do actually think that the lessons themselves have perhaps not had enough focus when we thought about enjoyment. And so one or two just little insights into how our schools have been working in terms of making the language and the word power and the beauty of the text come alive in their lessons. Number one, visual literacy. So a picture like that, and there's a bigger size, illustration by Vicky Cox from the book that you see there in the thumbnail. A fantastic beginning for what kind of story will this be? What kind of mood will it be? What kind of images do you notice? Can you link any images together? Can you suggest a theme? In a more sophisticated way into secondary, I think there's a place for that too. And it can move on very quickly. Knowledge chunking, picture, sliver of text into the text. This is a wonderful book called The Blue Planet by Andreas Schneier Magnusson, and do take a look at it. Just a snippet. There were high cliffs full of nesting birds and cold white glaciers that crawled to the sea, crunching and crumbling. We call it the zoom in effect, focusing in on words almost under the microscope, and the opportunity here for engagement, response, cold, crawled, crunching, crumbling. Fantastic word choice. Would you choose any different words? Cold, white glaciers. Would you choose different adjectives? What kind of onomatopoeia, what kind of metaphor you're beginning also to talk about the language of English without actually labeling and without setting the same old separate exercises. The learning dialogues really bring it to life that we see in our schools. They bring to life an examination of words which is not routine analysis, but which is exploration. What difference does each word make? And by knowledge chunking, picture to small sliver and onwards, you start to build this feeling that reading lessons are great fun. And reading lessons involve the beauty of language, word power, and the sifting and sorting of ideas, including connections. The children had endless adventures on the blue planet. They could follow fireflies in the dark or climb rocky cliffs and jump into warm waters. They could gather shells on the beach and watch the sea turtles crawl ashore to lay their eggs. We're keen on recommending to schools that connections, Michael Rosen calls them secret strings across texts, are emphasized. Think there of light and dark. Just think of one word, endless, and the difference that makes. Could there in fact be other words? All these kinds of exercises are really engaging and they involve word power development rather than what sometimes my colleagues have seen and what I saw in my action research in some schools, continual exercises on comprehension. Text, questions, text, questions. They're mini tests. Tests have their place, but actually these learning dialogues, these interactions between the beauty of what a fantastic author has written and how it's received in the learner's mind are really, really vital. And stage by stage, challenging text can be used, and then writing can link with reading, writing for reading. Taster drafts early on in the process are very popular in the Opening Doors series. Forest turned dark green in the evening when the wolves began howling, and black green at night when the bats awoke and spiders with hairy legs wove their webs between branches. In not more than 75 words, write about what else happens in the evening in the same kind of style. Can you craft a wondrous scene? Now that's a concept, building wonder. How does Magnuson build wonder in the text? That kind of approach can start at primary. And when you get the exploration of words, it can fire off some incredible writing. But the chorus is vital too, the bit that we can't model in such a short session, because the way that you as teachers inspire children and handle the talking partners and the groups and the timings that you need to actually bring those words alive is truly, what is wonderful to see. Plenty of research around. I've just got time to mention one book that I've enjoyed in the last year, by Dominic Wise and Charlotte Hacking, which keeps on reminding us that reading, writing, speaking, listening, they're the four modes of language. They can interact together. Crucially, teaching writing helps reading and reading helps writing. Therefore, undue separation of reading and writing should be avoided. Emphasis on teaching writing as a process is strong. So it's not just us talking about these kinds of interactions, but I think what we're beginning to say here is that what goes on in those lessons, in other words, your skills, your knowledge, your personality, is paramount when they come to choose independently for their reading for pleasure, if we want to call it that, moot point, is actually connected. If it's not connected, then there is a danger that the actual lessons can seem somehow less exciting, compared with grabbing hold of the books. And for children who don't like grabbing hold of the books and who are not enjoying their independent reading, what better support and help than really exciting reading lessons which start at primary and continue through secondary to have some of these interactions, and perhaps with a concept like building wonder to link it together. Look at the way this story goes on. As the light flooded the cave and shone on their wings, something wonderful happened. The butterflies awoke from their sleep. Very slowly and calmly they moved their wings, and then rose in the air one by one and flew out of the mouth of the cave. They followed the sun for a whole day, circling the planet over land and sea, mountains and valleys, before fluttering back into the cave and falling asleep again, not to awaken until another year had passed. You build on what you've learned so far. That's the knowledge chunking. And as you build, they start to enjoy the text more. I hope in a very small way you're beginning to as well, and want to find out more about the butterflies. They're in a cave and they're released once a year. And those marked points there are possible links to take further exploration into the whole wonder of the text, where connotation will be really, really important. And so very specific technical things in English are taught through the beauty of the text. And then we link. And as I come towards the sort of finale of my presentation, this is vital. That, by the way, is Ravensworth Primary's entrance to their school. That's not computer generated. They valued reading so much, they put it all up on the wall of the school. We link in whole text reading then. So building wonder, it might be Iron Man, it might be a picture book, The Wanderer, it might be a poem, The Wind and the Sea by Paul Laurence Dunbar, it might be The Wild Robot, it might be I Believe in Unicorns, it might be First Men in the Moon, with units from our books constantly being used. More picture books on the right. Hey, this becomes a rich world, a bonanza of reading, which is part of the curriculum. You're growing reading, you're growing readers, you're growing confidence. So when they go to choose their own book, we see a bit more power in that. And we see a bit more power and a bit more confidence in the reader to go and find what they want. And yes, it may range from comics to classic literature. Choice is vital for their independent reading. But we do think that more emphasis can be put on what's actually going on in the lessons. Kerry at Ryfield School writes, in class, I found that a habit of ambitious reading experiences can stimulate the voice of every child. By changing my mindset, I have inspired and enthused all of the personalities and abilities in my class. She did some great work, is doing some great work at Ryfield School. She might even have logged on today and be incredibly surprised to see this. But the key word there is habit. And the second key word is ambitious. The habit of ambitious reading experiences starts with the model. Who's the model? The teacher. And it can spread. So yes, there is choice for independent reading, but it's informed choice. It's choice with confidence, and that's then growing to include some of the pupils who might be more reluctant. And so you're linking independent thinking into everything else that goes on in English. Key points. The lessons themselves can be linked to a growth curriculum, growth in knowledge, growth in skills, growth in learning, keeping the choice when it comes to reading for pleasure. We think concepts can play their part, like building wonder, knowledge chunking, the writing for reading, above all, the link reading. Link reading links the books and the poems with the curriculum. Wider reading suggests it's something you might do or you could do. Bit of an option. The power we found of link reading is that it benefits what they've learned about building wonder via Andre Magnusson's great book into other whole text reading, and then that can link into the independent choices. I've put in red something just so vital. Your presence, your personality, and your relationships are just vital. And we see this everywhere we go. We're people who've been in hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands, of schools. And we see it everywhere. So when you have really, really succeeded in the lessons, we do see that having a fantastic effect when it comes to the confidence that needs to go into personal choices and what you read, etc., etc. Don't forget to look up more about us. One of my big mottos there, we need to be constantly searching for the means to make equity and excellence a reality. And reading for pleasure and growth, very much a part of that. I'll just say before I hand to Leah for a further and more detailed example, what you really want to avoid is a reading for pleasure, if you want to call it that. It is open to debate. If you want to avoid, I think, a sense in which reading for pleasure, that's great. The rest of it, you don't want it to be reading for pain, do you? And you don't want children's minds to think, oh, I've got to do some comprehension exercises now. We're calling it exciting comprehension, where they zoom in and they build these interactions with words and word power, and they ask questions and curiosity, and it's ambitious and challenging, and they're okay with that because of the brilliant way that you present it, because you are, the biggest influence on their education and learning. So over to Leah for more examples.
Thank you so much, Bob. I'm a proud member of Bob's team, proud member of the English Association as well, Becky. Thank you for having me. I'm going to pick up on probably all of the threads that Bob has mentioned there, but really zoom close up into a school case study of where this happened in quite remarkable ways. And Bob wheels me out often as well to do the learning dialogues bit as well. So if I have developed any expertise over the past 30 odd years in education, it's the absolutely crucial role of dialogue through the relationships that you build with your pupils through the texts and the relationships they have with each other through text that is the core of the English classroom. So let's go there together. Can I ask you folks please to open the chat box and have as many of you interacting as I teach you a mini bit of a mini sequence here. Okay, so I'm going to start with this little sliver from a text. Shut the door. Now, I think if we were live in the classroom, you'd be in groups of 3 or 4, and I'd set you a challenge straight away and say, can you in your small group think of ways to speak those words out loud in at least 2 different ways that change the relationship between the speaker and the listener? So actually the words mean something different. They carry a different message. So you can have, even with your mics off there, have a little play out loud with your voices wherever you're sitting at home or at school. It's great to then just listen to kids doing this live in the classroom, and then you can spotlight in on, I heard an interesting one over here, I heard a very different one over here. So we get things like, the very hierarchical difference of shut the door that they've heard before their teachers say, because you're going to get a telling off. But equally, you can have a very level pegging, conspiratorial tone, can't you? For shut the door, because I'm going to tell you a meaty secret, and totally changes the relationship between the speakers. So even that tiny sliver, there's an enaction in the classroom that is enacting with children that the meaning is not somewhere on the page that they've got to extract it. The meaning is a contingent, constantly evolving dialogue between them and the text and the author that was behind it. And this is a unit that's worked extremely well year 3, 4, even when children are only 7 years old. We can enact that in the classroom. This text needs you. It needs you to lift it off the page. It needs you to give it voice and tone, and it needs you to be building the meaning really actively. Yeah. And not just as a silent struggle on your own, kids, but together as a reading community. So we've played around there that tone is really important. We've got that concept live in the classroom. Now here's a little sliver from the poem that we're going to read together. She shall come in, answered the open door. and not said the room go out anymore. So we have 3 characters. We've got a door and a room who can speak. We're happy with that, year 3. And we've got a she, we've got a female character. Okay, so concrete preparation, we've got that set, but then here you come in, readers. What on earth could the mysterious situation be behind these 2 little slivers of dialogue? So this is where I'd like you to step back, have a think, and if you've got any ideas, please pop them in the chat box. Why on earth, why might the she not be able to go out of the room anymore once the door in the room have let her in? Answers on a postcard. 21st century, answers in the chat box. Oh. One-way vortex. So we're in a sci-fi situation. Thank you, Susan. Okay, she's a goner. They're going to gobble her up. Wonderful. Right, Jen. Okay, how different. Actually, they're keeping her safe. She's in danger outside of the door. Yeah, and are they protecting her? Oh, she is an element in the room, a candle, and they're going to protect her. Amazing, Cherry. Right. And do you know what, little age 7, age 8-year-olds, they're not far off the beautiful, very imaginative answers that you are posting in chat here. They are just, they draw, even if they're not drawing so much on poetry or on novels, they're drawing on films that they've seen, cartoons that they've seen. Yeah, they're drawing on story language to come up with reasons here. Okay, so I'm going to zoom you into it was a year 4 classroom in a school just in the Dean of Basingstoke-and-Deane, Mid-Hampshire, where our wonderful teacher Ellen she's got some ideas, and they've got these 2 ideas. That is the room going to trap her, or are they protecting her? So those key ideas that you folks have put in chat, these are live in the room already. Okay, then we reveal, just like Bob was saying, this slow reveal pathway through the text that gives children time to construct their meanings. We reveal a little bit more. There's someone at the door, said Gold Candlestick. Let her in quick. Let her in quick. There is a small hand groping at the handle. Why don't you turn it? Asked Green Candle. Now, I might read that dramatically. I might read it fairly neutrally, because I might have up my sleeve this fluency markup. This is a big part of my classroom. It's important class, isn't it? Acorn class, that you bring this text alive, you bring the tones in, yeah, and you begin to interpret it by the way that you start to read it. We're in a real golden age that fluency matters as that bridge between, can I just lift the words off the page and bark it? Can I actually begin to make sense of and understand it? If I can lift it off the page, I'm halfway to it making sense to me. So yeah, there might be a pause in my classroom where I say, right, each group's have a go, bring it alive, use your markup codes. But now we're going to come back to that same question of, why can't she leave the room? Yeah, that was the first little conundrum that we set. So now we're going to zoom into what really was year 4. So we're talking 8, 9-year-olds here, folks, in Ellen's classroom in Mid-Hampshire. And let's just see what happens. She comes back to them. They're in their groups of 3, and they've had time to prepare a group answer, really crucially, for the quality of their dialogue. No child has been picked off for an instant response. They've had time to prepare a small group response. Can you share your group's idea? Why can she not go out anymore? We think she was captured and now she's escaped. What made you think that? Well, like the room, oh no, the candlestick really wants her to come in because it says let her in quick, so maybe it's saving her. Thank you. Rest of the group, is there any other evidence that suggests she's escaped? And we get a pause, and we get silence, and we get stillness. Okay, maybe let's all look at this, says Ellen. Is there anything else that suggests she's been captured somewhere and is escaping back to the room? Plenty more time for the groups to go back. Okay, now we've got a pupil coming in. She's groping at the candle, which could mean she's a bit panicky, and so she wants to get in. That's helpful to us. Thank you. How about this group? Did you have a different idea to A's group? Right, pause, step back. Yeah, with your teacher lens on. What is Ellen doing here in her responses, her feedback to the group, that is supporting the children to become readers? Not read this text, but become readers through this seesaw of classroom dialogue. Are there any responses? Again, you could pop in chat for me. Thank you, Jill. Space and time, the silences, the pauses are really important. I'm going to point out to you that Ellen uses no praise. How on earth are these children going to know whether their responses are halfway decent if there is no praise? No, right. Okay, thank you, Cherry. It's speculative. Let's speculate and hypothesize. Different ideas. We've got one. Yeah, we've actually got 2 bits of evidence for this one idea. They might be saving her. And we've got that. Thank you. Might there be different? There's space for alternative interpretations, even when we're 8 years old. Yeah. Question is absolutely open. She hasn't got an idea in her head. She hasn't decided before the lesson the response that she wants. Yeah. So let's go a little bit deeper. Where does this go next? I'll let you read this yourselves, folks, again, but the same questions. Is there anything else that Ellen Glynn does here as we deepen into the lesson? Anything else in the teachery behaviours? Thank you, Cherry. Justification. Building on each other. This is a community of readers. Thank you, Sophie. Yeah, I'm not going to just take rubbish because anything goes in English. No, give me your evidence. Take us back to the text. Absolutely. Jennifer, thank you. Yeah, so these behaviours, these dialogic teacher behaviours are absolutely transferable. I think they are quite hard. My 30 odd years in education, this is not easy to teach in this way, but it is absolutely doable, and it is absolutely transferable. Oh, thank you, Laura. Yes, the scaffolding a response, and she'd be nervous because, come on, let's extend that thought. Let's make it available to everybody else in the room. There's a really subtle teaching going on here to keep mining the children's minds and to make sure other children can enter the thoughts of one pupil's idea. Yeah, she's not zipping through to get to an answer and now next bit, next question, next comprehension. Yeah, this is Ellen's voice. That's in chapter 8 of our ambitious primary English book. The aim of the reading session is always to make meaning together rather than arrive at a predetermined answer. When children are encouraged and supported to explore and evaluate their own thinking without overt judgment, they become more confident in expressing their ideas and are more willing to change them in the light of evidence. There's an agentive reader, and there's the acorn of that then, as Bob was saying, becomes transferable to. So I might want to pick up my own poem, might want to pick up my own book, because reading is challenging, but I enjoy the challenge. Yeah. And we just take a tiny step back here. This is my big point. Comprehension is not lifting meaning off the page, but constructing it actively. Yeah, with effort. It's effortful and it's challenging, but can we help children to enjoy that challenge? We're trying to reach through the text to that author's more complex mental representation with the bits of building blocks that we've got. Now, how hard is that if you're entirely on your own? It's isolating. Your kids feel cold, they feel lonely, but and that's when reading becomes something like, I don't want to touch that, because it's some silent struggle. Yeah. So I'm going to whiz over that one. Whereas if I'm not on my own, I'm building this jigsaw together with my class through this seesaw of dialogic talk, like in Marvelous Ellen's classroom, then it becomes a social, relational act. We explore, we construct our relation to the text and to each other and the world through this tiny little sliver of a poem. Yeah. And there's a research reference if you want to follow that up. Really wonderful paper by Isabel Beck and Joe McKeown. That struck, talking about text isn't some nice addition. It is the way to develop the mental patterns that we need for reading comprehension. So very swiftly, I won't give this the benefit that it deserves, but here is this very strange 1920s poem, Green Candles. Don't go, said the Heatherwhite chair, lest you find a strange lady there. Stay where you are, whispered the white wall, there is nobody there at all. I know her little foot, grey carpet said. Who but I should know her light tread? And then those ominous final lines. She shall come in, answered the open door, and not did the room go out anymore. Do you know what? I've taught this so much, and I don't even know if I like this poem, but I love what it does in the classroom. Children, it's so bizarre, it's so open. Yeah, it is so baffling. So this concept question that then is in Bob's unit, and I'll give you a link that you can follow a YouTube tutorial that leads you through the whole lesson sequence. What makes this poem so dramatic, so tense, and so like watching a moment unravel in this strange, fabulistic classroom? The children enter that, and it would take them several lessons to really explore that concept of the dramatic and the tone of it. Yeah, there follows this link. So I'm going to take you right to the writing that came out of this unit with Ellen's classroom. I know I've skipped part of the reading process there, but here's little Annabelle in year 4, who initially stays quite close to Humbert Wolff's model. Don't open it, said the oil lamp. So they've looked at, older archaic objects in a classroom. Lock it quick, lock it quick, said the stained wall. I don't want her now, not at all. It works so hard in the rhyme and the rhythm as well. Grand fireplace, broken comb. And then, okay, this was the wonder. Talk about wonder, Bob. This little group went on a week's tutorial to a Stubbington Outward Bound Centre, and they're sitting in their dorm room, and they said to their teacher, wonder what our dorm room would say about us when we leave, Mrs. Glynn. And before she went, that's fascinating. Should we do that when we get back to school? She got back to school after that weekend. Half of the class had already written, shut the Stubbington door. This just speaks more than any research ever can, I think, in that this poem had got inside them, this idea that objects can talk, has a memory, and what that perspective taking of what would all the objects in the room think of us when we've left. Just glance your eyes over it. She's got the different characters, perspectives. Some of them want the children there, some of them don't, with the stinky feet. Some of them are excited. Yeah. Just wonderful. And I'm not telling you a lie. Half of the class had written their poem, and then they all went in and played with that and developed it. So an insight into, is this transferable? Absolutely it is. Here's a little snippet from what was the end of one of my chapters in the Ambitious Primary English book, chapter 8. Teaching that supports pupils do become readers has to be centred on this dialogic seesaw exchange that builds the meaning. It's about the culture, it's about the nature of the questions and tasks, but then prompting these extended contributions, to really build the reading mind. The teacher building rich chains of inquiry, not single surface responses, and the children feeling they are in conversation with the text. The text needs them. The text is nothing without you. And that's when they start to feel like, yes, I'm becoming a reader, not just reading this text. One other tiny, you can take the slides when Becky sends this to you and look at this in more detail, but here's another example more recently from Penwood Primary, where Georgie had taught H.G. Wells just a sliver of War of the Worlds. And here's this little one in year 6, slightly less little, drawing H.G. Wells and saying he inspires me because he's like me. Like me, he is an illustrator and sci-fi writer. Just incredible. And then I've got a tiny little slivers of case studies I can remember from when I was head of English back in school, because we can pigeonhole and stereotype children. Robert, year 9, went into the Wimbledon under 16 team. He was so into his football, he was so brilliant. What's he most going to enjoy? He wanted his own copy of A Midsummer Night's Dream. Where can I find my own copy, Mrs. Crawford? Year 9 footballer. And then Nick, who spent all his weekends doing Eddie Stobart lorry spotting on the motorway bridge with his mates, and we go, what on earth? I can't find Nicholas a book. And we did The Rime of the Ancient Mariner, and I had a graphic novel version that was comic but had all of the text in it, and it was that woke him up. I love this. Where can I find more of that, Mrs. Crawford? So that was just my final point, is to say, you never know. There's a branch in reading for pleasure, which is I've got to find, because you're football-y, I've got to find you a football book, you know, because you're a girl who rides ponies, I've got to find you a book about ponies. Is what I have found in 30 odd years. You never know what kind of text is going to wake children up to reading. In fact, they surprise you more than they than they don't surprise you. And absolutely, as Bob has said, from my perspective, it's what I taught in the curriculum and what our Opening Doors teachers teach in the curriculum that wakes up the potential to become an agentive reader into the future. I need to stop. Jenny.
Jenny, you're muted, so we can't hear you. I'm sorry.
How embarrassing. Here I am. Hi, everyone. Lovely to see you. Thank you so much for having me this afternoon. So I'm going to speak a little bit more from a secondary perspective, but actually, I honestly think all of these things are just so, like, that there's no cutting off in year 6, or, you know, children are children, and the way they learn is the way they learn. So just a really, really quick one on kind of the concept of reading for pleasure. I have a problem with this term, and I know a lot of people do. And I think that in some ways it kind of suggests that it's our job as educators to tell children what they should enjoy in their spare time. And it has a slight tinge of like kind of like, I don't know, like privileged middle class telling other people that if they're not reading a classic novel, then they're not doing anything worthy. And I think that's a really unfortunate tinge. However, the idea of pleasure and joy, as it is linked to reading, is still really important. And I think it's important that we think about independent reading and we think about volitional reading. So this idea, Bob mentioned volitional reading, so this idea that children choose to read, they choose a book, they choose to read a poem or to kind of engage in text, and that's a really exciting thing. Now, I'm just going to go through a few principles and share some examples of things. So principle number 1 is that children will not choose to do something they find hard or where they have low self-efficacy. So children who are willing to do difficult things and willing to push themselves through struggle in the classroom or at home independently are the ones who feel confident that they can overcome that struggle. So it's really, really important for their motivation to read in the first place that they feel like they identify as a reader. They have the identity of a reader, that they feel like, you know, a difficult, you know, my 8-year-old is in a house full of readers and he will be reading at night and he has a dictionary next to him and he doesn't mind finding things he doesn't understand, but he's in a really privileged position. If a child is struggling and they associate reading with failure, that can essentially stop them from really wanting to engage with reading at all. And so particularly in the age group I work with, so children who are kind of 11 to 16 plus, often we've got to get over that barrier. And I'm not going to have a rant now about like children who physically can't, well, literally can't read, so children who have illiteracy barriers, because that's a whole different podcast, webinar. But what's important is that that's a really important thing, and so we have to think about how we as schools build that self-efficacy in children, through their experiences in the classroom, through their experiences with us. The second thing I think is also having a definition of reading which is broad and rooted in our current reality, because reading isn't just kind of one thing, okay, and it has changed dramatically in kind of nature. So what I mean by that is making sure that as a school, as a kind of teacher community, we understand what we think is, you know, worthwhile or worthy reading experience. So there is a big outcry often around, you know, children can't pay attention when we're doing a slow burn novel where nothing happens for ages, and that kind of slow, tense build up. And that's a really particular type of text which has a huge amount of status, right? And it was a really interesting piece of writing a couple of weeks ago about college, bemoaning the fact that college students in the States aren't reading novels and things. And actually, novels, yes, great. Novels are really important. We want to expose children to novels. We want them to have the experience of healthy struggle and success in reading a novel, and that's really important. But also, short form fiction is such a fantastic kind of source for us in the classroom, because we also have curricular constraints and time constraints. But magazines and blogs and social media feeds and story panes on video games and things which are graphic novels and things which are verse novels, which I'm a huge fan of, which are kind of novel length but told through poetry, and they're quite quick to read. Those kinds of texts, this kind of multimodal literacy kind of world that we live in now, we have to decide what we value. And I think that we have to be realistic about the fact that, you know, a lot of people enjoy reading text which isn't in kind of paper format. And we have to kind of be able to validate the things that children are choosing as well. So we have to decide where we draw the line. I'm not going to tell you where to draw the line, but what I will say is that in really, really well-designed video games, there is a very, very powerful narrative arc. And there are things that children are learning through a lot of those things as well. I think it's really important that we think about the reality of the reading experience as well, and how that's changed, and how that therefore has to change what we're doing in the classroom to some extent. So I really love this line from Kevin Kelly. So we now read words floating non-linearly in the lyrics of a music video or scrolling up in the closing credits of a movie. We might read dialogue balloons spoken by an avatar in a virtual reality, or click through the labels of objects in a video game. Like, text pops up all over the place. This isn't just a reading from left to right on a book page anymore. And so understanding that actually my understanding of what reading is very different to what my children's understanding of reading is now, because of the way they experience text everywhere. And we need to make sure that when we are teaching young people, we are teaching them to engage with texts as they exist in the world, right? So yes, as a subject, it's our job to teach novels and poetry and drama and engage with those really important core foundational texts. But it's also really important for us to understand that in their later life, they might have to engage with a really big kind of chunky website, which has lots of text in different places, and things that they have to click to go through, and interesting indicators, and how do they read an infographic when the title isn't in the top left-hand corner and actually it might be down here? You know, how do they learn those kinds of skills? And I think that's an important thing for us to think about as well. Has a book materially changed? A lot of our younger children will be engaging with text on tablets often, and they are wonderful. There are so many things that they can do, and click on things and it will speak words to them, and it will kind of, you know, there are so many options. And you know, when I see my 5-year-old sometimes pressing on my Kindle as if it's going to do something, because it won't, you know, that's a kind of a wake-up call for me, when I'm like, he thinks that the book is going to talk to him, and it's not. So that's a really important thing for us to be thinking about. So reading is important. Reading in multiple forms is important. And we know, Bob kind of quoted that NLT data at the very start, that young people are not reading very much in their own time. And what I often have to think about, like what we have to think about when we work in schools on the front line, is that if they're not doing it in their own time right now, if they're not choosing it right now, I can't, you know, sit with them at home and make them do it. So what we have to do is use the time we have in school really, really, really well. And if they're not doing it by choice, sometimes we have to make them do it in the school day. And we have to therefore get them to a point where they are building their confidence while they're at school so that they will choose it later on. And that's a really slow, difficult process, but it can bear fruit. So my third principle is therefore making the most of the time we have, connect wider reading with the curriculum itself, make time to read during the school day and build self-efficacy while they're in front of you. So if you've got them right there, that's when we should be doing these things. So making sure, for example, and this is something that we can be quite guilty of in the secondary curriculum, when we don't really have a lot of time, is making sure that we are reading during lessons and that children are experiencing high quality text on a regular basis. One example of that might be, and lots of schools do this, so I'm not saying that we're kind of perfect or special, but at Carlton Academy Trust, our children have an hour a week where they're just reading a novel at pace with their teacher. So they might be reading Jane Eyre, they might be reading The Hate You Give, they might be reading To Kill a Mockingbird, they might be reading Salt to the Sea. They'll be reading a novel at pace and they're just reading it for fun, right? They're just, that's not the curricular text they're reading, they're just reading that text with an expert reader so they can experience a novel without it feeling like they're having to battle through a novel, right? But then in the kind of English lessons more traditionally, when we're studying a novel, we're kind of engaging them with all of those things that Leah and Bob have spoken about so beautifully, because those things work so well in secondary as well. And what's really important is that kind of, we have to make time to read, and if we don't feel like we have enough time to read in our English curriculum, then we are probably not using our curriculum time as well as we could, because reading is the most important thing we could be doing with that time, in my view. I'd also argue that outside of the English curriculum, other subjects need to be supported to bring reading into their curriculums, bring story into their curriculum, but I don't have time to talk about that, so I will spin it along. For me, and I'm so glad, and I knew Bob would say this because he says it all the time, and it's one of the things I really like about his work, and this idea that reading and writing are really, really closely linked, and this is critical. So just an example of how this might work in a secondary setting, this is one of the 12 ways to play, which we have developed at my trust, which is, you don't have to be able to read that, I'll show you a blown up version in a second, but this is basically to help teachers model creative writing, right? So we've had lots of teachers who are super keen to teach writing, but they have no idea what to do because they're not writers, right? So I'm saying, okay, here are 12 really cool things you could do with texts when you're modeling things, and they're little tricks, they're little kind of gymnastics moves that kids can go, oh, I like that, or I don't like that. So here's an example. This one's called This or That, and what it basically means is that the children look at a line from a writer. So this is Blake, right? So the Mind Forged Manacles I Hear is Blake's original. Let's be really irreverent. Let's rip some Blake apart and figure out what we might do instead. So the first example, we turn it into, we just take the metaphor out and make it a really literal line, right? Why do we do that? What does it change? How does it make us feel differently? Does it take something away from the text? Does it gain something? The next one, we replace the metaphor with a simile. Is it good? Is it bad? Does it make it more fussy? Does it make it better? Do you prefer it? Why? There are no wrong answers. This is all about kind of students having agency to make those decisions. The third one, we just added a triplet to describe sound as well. What does that do? Do we like it? Is it too much? This example for me always, and Blake's just there as an example for the teacher, but they could use any text they're reading, they could use student work, they could use anything at all. But what I really like about this is it encourages them, A, to recognise that Blake is an actual genius, and that none of those are better than the original. But I mean, you know, some of them might actually like the other versions, but it encourages them that like they can take anything and move things around, and that's the point, right? Language is something we should manipulate. And another, what they would then be doing, like they'd be kind of showing these things under a visualizer and having conversations, right? What do you notice about what's happening already? So this is a writing method where children are being shown interesting things, but they are being encouraged to engage and kind of create those written text by being a reader first. Right? And that doesn't mean they have to read a whole novel first. That means they could read one line, one image, one little section of a text and go, oh, I quite like that. This is interesting. But let's change something. Let's model some different options, and then get the children to really think. So all those things that Leah was talking about, that discursive classroom practice, what is different about this choice? Does it change the meaning? Does it add something? Does it take it away? Is it appropriate in this context? Which one do you prefer and why? Why do you think the writer made the choice they did? And when children then go away and practice in their own writing, and they go, right, do you know what? I'm going to take the draft I wrote last time and I'm going to do a this or that. I'm going to swap in or out a different device or a different word or whatever. And then they get to stop and go, what do I think? Do I like my original version more? Why? Do I like the one that my teacher has kind of shown me? Does this take something away? And it's about them being able to start having a really sophisticated dialogue with themselves as a writer who reads their own work. And I just think that's such a powerful thing. I mean, I've got loads of these, but they're kind of in development at the moment. We've been using them for about a year across our schools, and they work beautifully. So this is another one where we're looking at, it's called What You Don't Say. So it's kind of alienation, right? So it's that idea that we give either too much information or, you know, a tiny bit of information, or we kind of just give them, you know, so Orwell is a really lovely example of this opening line, because we're like, ooh, what's going on? So here's an example. So on the left, the man appeared to be swallowed by the heavy grey which hung from his narrow shoulders, is a really kind of loose description, whereas the one on the right, the man had a very small frame and was wearing a coat which was far too big for him because he didn't have any money and been given this one by his brother, is really literal. Like, here's loads of information. Now, those aren't, it's not that one is better than the other, it's that they're just different choices. And some children might want to give really, really clear, kind of almost like utilitarian, like, here are the facts about this person's life, and that might be the style they're going for. And some of them might want something a bit more elusive and a bit more kind of another example would be this one. So when we take away agency, which I think is really powerful, so taking away, like, explaining what happened or not. So the bird was killed by the wolf. It's really factual, it's really clear. The bird lay motionless on the ground. We don't even know if the bird is dead, let alone been killed by something. So there's a really interesting kind of, and again, we would say, right, kids, let's take something you wrote last time, or let's take this really interesting line in whatever it is we're studying. Let's be readers. Let's think, what could we take away? What information could we add? What could we do to make it more mysterious or more tense or more kind of you know, what's the word, kind of abstract? Or what could we do to make it really, really, really like obvious and kind of hit our reader in the face with what's going on? And that's just such a beautiful way of getting them to really think, and again, be readers while they're writing. Principle 5, the last thing, is just about embracing really creative and unusual ideas to make reading accessible, because we don't have a lot of money, we don't have a lot of time. Even the best head teachers who are making the best decisions they possibly can, like with the resources they've got, don't have enough money to give us everything we want. So I'm just going to give you a couple of ideas for how you can do that, and things that we've done. So and I also think that the sell matters, so how we make things look. If reading looks attractive, if it's got attractive resources attached to it, if the library is a welcoming place to be, if you create, you know, we should be like, oh, reading should sell itself. It doesn't sell itself. It's competing against TikTok, so it's got to look good, you know. So the first thing that we did in one of my schools is we had a build our library fund. So imagine that you're getting married and you have a gift list at John Lewis. We basically did a gift list at a local independent bookshop and said to our community, local businesses, anyone who visited the school, here's a code, and you could just donate £5 to this local bookshop, and every month the bookshop would just fulfill our order and send us a pile of books, because we gave them a list of books we wanted. So people would either buy a specific book for us, or they would give us 50 quid and the bookshop would just fulfill the list. We got about £2,000 worth of books for free through that, and also supported a local independent, which was brilliant. It's just such an easy thing to do. Call your local independent bookshop. Another really important thing, and this sounds really obvious, but have lists of books which are going to support children to make good choices. Now, that isn't a definitive list of all the good books that exist. That's my year 7 transition list. Some of those books are books that are already kind of heavily studied in primary, but not in all of them. And what's important is that children have got a place to start. And then what's important is that we have well-trained staff who can then go, if you liked that one, here's this one, right? Really important. And it's also important to incentivize, to say, right, year 7, your challenge is to read 3 of these by Christmas. We've got loads of copies in the library because of our Build Our Library scheme. And it's that kind of making it really obvious to them. Anywhere where you can remove the barrier in their head between reading and not reading is good. So anything where you can say, here is a selection of 5 books, choose one of the 5. It makes the whole thing easier for them. This is a really nice one. We basically produced a set of QR codes for every single day in the Christmas term. It was a Church of England school, this one, and it was like a reading cultural advent calendar. So every single one was either, we had teachers who had recorded themselves reading short stories like The Little Match Girl. So like each day there was a thing. And some of them were like somebody talking to camera. Sometimes it was children sharing their own personal kind of Christian traditions for Christmas. But a lot of them were reading based. So lots of them were things like, one was Stormzy reading The Night Before Christmas. There were some really lovely things in here, and that was just great. And we just gave it to kids as they left the building every day, basically. They just got a new QR code. It was really nice. Making sure that we make it really, really easy for teachers to notice and reward children reading. So these are the postcards that we have in my schools at the moment, and they're so easy. They're pre-printed. Staff just get some every week, and they're just giving them to their classes, signing them, and they're taking them home. And they gain kind of rewards points for it, but it's about making it as easy as possible for the teachers to just notice. I noticed that you've done your reading homework, or I noticed you've done this, I've noticed you've done that. That's brilliant. Off you go. Kids kind of love a postcard. It's nice. And then one thing that might be useful is something that we've been working on my website for a couple of years, which is now, I think, a really, really, really useful resource. And there are hundreds of texts on here. So what we did, and this is, you know, completely free to access. This is the reading list project, and we have had hundreds and hundreds of book recommendations from teachers all over the country for different age groups. And basically what people do, because we know that it's really hard to find books for your curriculum and find books for reading lists, what we've got is teachers submit their book recommendation. They'll say, I've just read this book, or I've taught this book and it's brilliant. They submit information about that book, which will be things like the length, any kind of content warnings that they think are important, what year group they would recommend it for, that kind of thing. And it automatically goes onto this page and we publish it. And so basically you can go onto here on my website, and it's just, if you just Google the reading list project, you'll find it. But it looks like this. There are so many books on here. We've got more coming in for primary, which is cool, but loads and loads and loads and loads for secondary. You can filter by female authors, non-white authors, various genres, key stage 3, key stage 4. But when you click on a book, you'll get a page like this. And it tells you like the length, the genre, a brief synopsis, reasons why you would recommend it. So like, what does it do in your curriculum, and kind of content warnings and things like, so, you know, this one includes there's a child stealing things, and there's also bereavement, right? So that's a useful thing. But it's such a useful resource because what it's doing, like, you know, I think I submitted 2 or 3 of these, and there are hundreds, and it's such a nice crowdsourced thing. So if you ever kind of need advice for choosing books, then please feel free. But also, if you know good books that you have read, please could you submit them, because it's really helpful. That's me. I hope that's useful.
Great. Absolutely superb. Thank you very much, Jennifer. Thank you, obviously, Leah. I mean, just a bonanza of ideas, I hope, for everyone, with some interesting principal mindsets, maybe, that, you know, it really is about the curriculum. I love, Jenny, you said it, the 25 plus hours, however many hours it is, the curriculum matters, because when they're with you, you're there to influence them. Your expertise, knowledge, skills, but your relationships. And that will have a very positive effect on the independent choice. But so many practical ideas and examples. I know we're actually over time already. So I'll also say thank you to Becky and the English Association once again for the fantastic support. We're here for questions, but Becky may wish to close it. I realise that because of time. And thanks, Jenny. Thanks, Leah. Thanks, Becky.
And thank you to you as well, Bob, Leah, Jennifer. It's just been such a pleasure. Thank you to everyone who's come along today to listen. I'm afraid, going to stop now because we have to let people go. But I think if anyone has any burning questions, if they want to email them to me, I'm happy to collate them and pass them on. So thank you very much, everyone. And I hope to see you at another one of our events soon. Thank you.
Thanks. And thank you for the thank yous that we can see going in there.